Okay, good morning, everyone. We are on the Mishnah on Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. Top of Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. So we're going to discuss today a few different topics in Mishpatim. So it says in Mishpatim, that if you have a shore, if you have an ox, and your ox gores another person, and that person dies, so sakol yisakel hashor. So you have to kill the shore, but the Baal Hashor is naki. You, the owner of the shore, is going to be naki, is going to be clean. However, v'im shor nagachu mitmol shel shom. If this is now a muat shore, so if you have a shore and it already went ahead and was considered to be muat, so now it's a third time. V'im shor nagachu mitmol shel shom. So now what happens? V'mis isho isha hashor yisakel v'gam ba'alav yumas. If this shore has gotten into trouble before, so now not only do you kill the shore when it goes ahead and kills a person, the Baal of the shore dies also. And Rashi explains it doesn't mean that the Baal of the shore actually dies. If your shore, which is Muad, goes out and kills somebody, the Baal doesn't actually die. Rashi says, Bidei Shamayim. He dies Bidei Shamayim. And you might think Bidei Adam, etc., Tam Alomar Mos Yumas. And then the next pasuk says, Im Kofer Yushas Alav. And Rashi says that the Im doesn't mean if you want. It's like Im Kesev Talves Hami. You need to go ahead and you need to pay. So again, then we're talking about just in Mishpatim first, as an introduction. If you have a shore and your shore kills a person, so that shore gets killed and nothing happens to you. If this is a shore that's already gotten into trouble before, and now it's a shore muad, we're on the top of Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. And if the shore has already gotten into trouble and now it goes ahead and kills somebody, so now not only do you need to pay for the shore, not only does the shore die, but you have to pay a kofer on your life. I.e., you have to pay a payment in order to, as a ransom for your life, because you should really die, since your shore is a shore muad and it kills somebody else, so you should really have to die, so you pay a kofer. So there's a kofer when it's a muad and no kofer when it's a tam. Fine. What happens if your shore goes ahead and kills another shore? So if your shore goes ahead and kills another shore, so if it's a tam, if it's the first time, so then you have to pay half of what the other shore was worth, as we'll see in the Gemara, and if it's a muad, then you need to pay the entire amount. So again, if your shore kills another shore, if it's the first or second time, then you have to pay half of the amount that the other shore was worth. So if you killed the $500 shore, you need to pay $250 to its owner. And if it's already if your shore already killed a few other shorim, so then you need to pay the full amount of that other shore. And by a person, if your shore kills a person, then we kill the shore and you're off the hook. But if your shore was already a troublemaking shore and it kills another person, so then if it's a muad, so then you need to go ahead and kill the shore, and you need to pay a ransom to that guy or to his family for your life, whatever your life is worth, quote unquote, which we're not going to discuss today. You need to pay a ransom because you should have been more careful with your shore. That's the background. We'll get to it a little bit later. Ha'omer patisi es bito shel ploni, on top of Mem Aleph Amud Aleph. If a person says that I seduced this girl, mishalim boshe du pagam al piatma ve'im mishalim knas. So he pays the boshe du pagam penalty, but he doesn't pay the knas. Why? Rashi explains, mo de beknas parter. We know from Baba Kama that a knas, that if you admit to a penalty, so you're pater, because the pasuk says asher yarshiun elokim, that only if you get in trouble through God, and not marshias atzmo. So again, if you say that you seduced a girl, so you need to pay the embarrassment and the depreciation of the girl if you're the one who comes to Beis Din. Again, you admitting in a Beis Din is not what we're talking about. We're talking about there are no Eidim, there's nothing. You come to Beis Din and said, I seduced a girl. You need to pay the Boshet Begam, but you do not pay the Knas that we spoke about last week. You don't pay the Knas, the penalty, because penalties are only paid when you're brought to court and found guilty. Ha'omer ganafti, if you said I stole, mishalim es ha'karen al piatzma, so you pay the amount that you're claiming to have stolen. You don't pay the double or 4 or 5 times, because again, that's a knas, that's a penalty on top of what you stole, and we don't make you pay a penalty al piatzma when you're the one admitting to it. Hey, mishori es ploni or shor shel ploni, my shore killed that person or that person's shore. So again, what happens if my shore kills that person? Then I need to go ahead and kill my shore, and I don't pay anything unless it's a muad. And if my shore kills another shore, then I pay half. Unless it's a muad, then I pay the whole. So what are we saying here? Raizel mishalim al piatzmo. So if I say that my shore killed another shore, then I need to pay al piatzmo. Okay, we'll see what that means. Hey mishori avdo shel ploni. If I say that my shore killed that eved, ein mishalim al piatzma, I don't pay. Why? Because an eved, you don't pay the amount of the eved, you pay just a 30 sela penalty. And if it's a penalty, then I can't pay al piatzmo. This is the rule. Kol ha-mishalim yeser amasha hizik, eino mishalim al piatzmo. Anybody who pays more than he was mazik, he doesn't pay al piatzmo, because anything more than you were mazik is considered to be a knas. Okay? Perfect, easy Mishnah. Gemara. Velisnei anasti. Why does the Mishnah say that we believe a guy for Boshet Upegam when he says that I was mefata the girl, but we don't believe him for knas? But it doesn't say the same thing by an ones when he raped a girl. What's the difference between raping and mefata? You would think that in both cases, you think that by an ones you would also believe him about Boshet Upegam, and you wouldn't believe him about knas as well. So why doesn't it say anasti lo mi bay kamer? The Gemara says I don't need to tell you that. Lo mi bay anasti de lo kap hagim la de mishalim Boshet Upegam al piatzmo. This is not about the knas part. Again, the Mishnah was talking about the knas part, but in terms of the first part of mishalim Boshet Upegam, so we're saying why doesn't it say that by an honest also? Because I don't have to tell you that. It's obvious that the guy who says that I'm a nasty is going to have to pay the Boshet Begam. Why? Because when he says that I raped this girl, so it's not such an embarrassment to the girl. It's an embarrassment, but it's not so embarrassing to have been raped. It's much more embarrassing to say that I was seduced and I actually consented to the relations. So if he says I'm nasty, so he wants to give her money, I raped her, so then we're going to tell her, okay, of course he could pay the money, the Boshet Begam. So maybe when he says that I seduced her, we're not going to believe him to go ahead and pay the money because that's going to give her a bad name. Kamash Malan, that we do have him go ahead and give the money. Now the Gemara doesn't explain what the Kamash Malan is. Kamash Malan, that we don't care that it's going to give her a bad name. Kamash Malan, that it's not going to give her a bad name. Unclear. But Kamash Malan, that even by the Mefata, you're going to have to pay the Boshet Upegam as well. Masnis and Deloki Aitana Detana. The Mishnah is not like this other brisa that says Rabbi Shimon Yehuda, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon. Af Boshet Upegam Eino Mishalim Al Piatzmo. That the Boshet Upegam they don't pay when he comes to admit it. Lo Kol Heimenu Sheyifkom Bito Shalploni. Because we're not going to believe him to make a pagam of this daughter. Now again, seemingly Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Yehuda is talking about which case? Ones and Mefata. Mefata. Because again, everybody seems to agree that by an onus we're going to accept the payment that he admits because it's not so embarrassing for somebody to say that she was raped. Again, we look at it like being bad, but they said, what?
I would have thought the opposite.
You would have thought the opposite. We're saying, no, it's not so bad because again, in terms of her, it's not so bad to be raped because it wasn't anything that she consented to. But in terms of the mefata, so it is something that she consented to. Kamash Malon, that we still get the payment. But according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda, no, we don't get the payment. Because again, we're not going to believe him to make her look bad. So Amalei Rapapa Labai, Nechala L'Didei Mai. According to the opinion who holds that we're not going to believe him when he says, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda who holds that we're not going to believe him to say that he seduced her because it makes her look bad, what happens if she says, okay, I agree, or I'm willing to take the money, fine, say whatever you want about me, but it's worth it for the money. We still don't make him pay because the father might not like it. It might ruin his business. Let's say the father says, no, I'm on board too. I wanted to get the money. No, but then one of the brothers or one of the immediate family is going to be upset because it's going to make them look bad. Let's say they get the whole family on board. We're willing to accept this guy's testimony and we're willing to take the payment. It's going to affect somebody. There's somebody out there who one day is going to have their shidduch resume and somebody's going to look at it and they're going to say, oh, aren't you related to this mifata, the person who was seduced? Yes, I am. Okay, I'm not going out with you. Just like your parents' tablecloth is not white on Shabbos, and at the end of the day, that is going to be a problem. And therefore, what?
It's already a pagam. It's already a mutzah right here. And
so we're saying it's not.
The money because it's already out of the avir.
So the Gemara is not learning. The Gemara is not learning like that. The Gemara is learning that if they don't take the money, then it's kilu. This guy's crazy. We don't believe him, and that's it. And there's no motzi shema over there. It's a crazy guy. He could come say anything about anything. So we look at him like he's crazy. So we're not going to believe him no matter what. Again, this is according to the second opinion. According to the first opinion, we're going to believe him. According to the second opinion, we're not going to believe him, even if she's mochel, even if the father's mochel, even if the bnei mishpach are mochel, because there's somebody out there who this is ultimately going to come back and haunt. Ha'omer ganafti mishalim es hakeren. Now this is not talking about the case of ganafti. Now we're going back, and that's why I spent so much time on the beginning, in the introduction. Now we're talking about the case where my shore kills another person's shore. So my shore kills another person's shore. If it's the first time, so then my shore dies, and I have to pay half of the other shore. That means if the other shore was worth 500, I need to pay 250. And again, if it's a muad, if my shore had already been in trouble, then if my shore kills another, if my shore kills another shore, and so then my shore gets killed and I don't pay anything. But if my shore was already a muad, so then... One second, I'm reading the wrong one, I'm sorry. Let's go back a second. Where are we here? That's talking about killing a person. Right. Right. If my shore kills another shore, if it's the first time or second time, then I have to pay half. If it's already a muad that it misbehaves, so then I have to pay the full amount. So in the case where I have to pay half, it's the first time where my shore goes ahead and kills another shore and I need to pay half. The question is the half that I'm paying, is that a penalty? Or is that what I actually owe? What's the nafkamina? Everything that we're saying here. If it's a penalty, then if I come and say that my shore killed your shore, then I can't pay it because it's a mod debit knas and it's putter. But if it's not a penalty and it's actually a payment that I owe half of your shore when my shore kills your shore, so then at the end of the day, I have to pay it even if I'm the one admitting it. That's what the question of the Gemara is here. So Gemara says, Itmar, Palganiska, this half of the payment that you're paying when your shore kills another shore for the first time. Rav Papa Amar Palganiska Mamona, it's a payment, and therefore you can pay it even al piatzmo. Rav Huna Bredi Rav Yeshua Amar Palganiska Knasa, and therefore you don't pay it al piatzmo. Rav Papa Amar Palganiska Mamona Kesavar Stam Shvarim La Becheska Shimur Kaime Uvedin Hu Demishalim Kule Verachmana Hu Dechayis Aluya Deakati Lo Iyai Torah. So the one who says that it's actually a mamon, so what does he hold? So we're saying that really shorim in general, you can't assume that a shore is going to babysit for itself. Just like you can't leave your 5-year-old children home by itself, you can't leave a shore home by itself. So a shore in general, you assume cannot watch itself. And therefore, even if it's a tom, even if it's never done anything wrong before in its life, you can't leave a shore just to hang out alone at night while you're just going out and partying. So over here, what happens? So this shore goes ahead, and what does it do? The shore goes ahead and kills somebody. So really, how much should you have to pay? You should have to pay the full amount, because you shouldn't have left your shore home without a babysitter. But over here we say, no, Rachmanahu dechayis aluya, that Hashem had compassion on you since it never happened before, and since you were a little bit negligent, but not too negligent, because Lamaisa, your shore never did anything wrong before. So the Rachmana so Hashem had Rachmanas on you and says you only have to pay half. But that half that you're paying is a full payment. It's just you should have paid the full payment, but he had Rahman on you and he's only making you pay half. So Modeh, if you agree that your shore killed another shore, so Lamaisa you need to pay it because it's only a mamona. Rav Huna Bredi Rav Yeshua Amar Palganiska Knasa, the one who holds that it's a knas, that it's a penalty. So what does he hold? He obviously is going to hold what? That you shouldn't have had to pay anything. Why? Kesavar stam shvarim becheska shimur kaimei uvedin hu delol shalim klal. Because a regular shore which has never done anything before, there's no reason you can't leave it home without a babysitter. Who said it's going to go ahead and it's going to misbehave? So really, you shouldn't have to pay anything. V'rachmanahu dekanse kihechi denintere l'torei. But Rachmana gave a penalty so that people will be a little bit more careful watching the shore. Even though you can leave it home with a babysitter, you should leave it home with something to do. You shouldn't just leave it with nothing to do, just hanging out there, because then he's going to go ahead and think. So you should have been a little bit more careful and made sure he was a little bit tied up. You should have made sure that he had some extra food. Shouldn't have let him so that he was bored and he was going off and wandering. So again, according to this opinion, really you should have not been watching it. Really you didn't have to watch it. And really you shouldn't be chayiv anything. But since you should have done a little bit to make sure that it's not going to go out, even though it's never done anything wrong before, the half that you're paying now is a knas, it's a penalty, and if it's a penalty, so then according to that Mandi Omar, you would not have to pay it if you are the one who comes and is modeh to Beis Din. Good? Mm-hmm. Siman. Hizik ma vehemis klal. 4 different things. Tnan. We're going to continue on this discussion of this half that you're paying. When your shore is a first-time offender, so this half that you're paying, whether it's a knas or whether it is a mamon payment. Tnan. Hanizak vehamazik betashlumin. The nizak and the mazik need to pay, and they both lose. What does that mean? Well, the mazik loses because he needs to go ahead and pay half. Regardless, he needs to pay half. The nizak loses as well. So what does the nizak lose? What does that imply? So Gemara says, Bishlam alamanda amar palga niska mamona hainu deshayach nizak b'tashumin. If you say that really the nizak should have gotten the whole amount, because it was a tashlumin, it was a payment, but God had compassion on the mazik because the maaseh was his first time. So I understand when you tell me that the nizak is losing something, he's losing the half payment that he should have had, but God had compassion on the mazik. If you're telling me that really what the mazik needs to pay over here is only a knas, because really he didn't have to watch his animal, but God gave him a little slap on the hand because the mazik should have been a little bit more careful. So now that the nizak's getting money, really how much did the nizik deserve to get? Nothing. In this case, according to the fact that it's a knas, he shouldn't have gotten anything. Now that we're giving him something, so he's getting half more than he should have gotten. Therefore, how can you tell me in the Brisa that the Nizak is B'tashlumin, that the Nizak is losing something? Again, the way the Gemara is understanding this for this Brisa now is that the Nizak seems to be losing something. So if he really deserved the whole thing, but God had compassion on the Mazik because there was a first-time offender, so then I understand what the Mazik is. I understand what the Nizak is losing. He's losing half of what he should have had, half the value of his animal. But if the Nizak shouldn't have gotten anything because it's really not the Mazik's fault, because Stam Shvarim are considered to be watched, and it was just that God made a penalty on the Mazik, so then the Nizak's getting 50% more than he should have gotten. So what's the problem? What does it mean he's losing? Lo nitzrucha ela pachas nevela. No. Even if you hold that it's a knas, it's not talking about that he's losing half that he should have gotten. Even within the half that he gets, he still loses. Why? As Rashi explains, who's going to be responsible now for the carcass? The nizak, the guy whose animal was killed. And what comes out basically is, let's say that the guy's animal is worth $500. And now this shore goes ahead and kills this animal. So how much does he get? He gets $250. Whether it's a knas or a moment, he gets $250. But the difference is that now this animal dead is still worth $100. So he doesn't get the $250, because how do you figure out how much he owes? You take the amount he was worth before he died, and the amount that he's worth now that he died. So he was worth $500 before he died, now he's worth $100. So how much do I have to pay? I have to pay $200. What about the extra $100? Well, we assume that I'm going to go ahead and sell it. The problem is that if we're going to court, it's going to take a few days to fix everything up. The amount that it's worth when it died was $100. Now when I can finally sell it, it's only worth $50. Because now it's a few days later, and it got more disgusting. Who loses that $50? I do, the owner of the actual thing. Again, it doesn't seem to be fair. We're not going to discuss it. The Gemara doesn't talk about it, but it doesn't seem to be fair. But at the end of the day, if you killed my shore, so you need to pay me half. Again, it seems unfair, but if you're saying that it's a kanas and I shouldn't have gotten anything, then I understand. But if you're saying I should have gotten the whole thing, but we were lenient, then already, okay. So 500, now it's worth 100. How much does he pay me? He pays me 200, but that extra 100, I lose out whatever the value goes down between the time that it dies and the time that I am able to sell it. And that's what the Gemara means, that even the nizak loses something as well. But it's not talking about the nizak losing, and therefore you can't prove from anything over here that it's a knas, or that, again, right? They wanted to prove that it must be that it's a tashlumin and not a knas, because if it was a knas, then what's he losing? He's saying, no, even if you hold that it's a knas, he's still losing the amount that it goes down, that it is devalued between the time that it dies and the time that you're able to actually sell it. So Gemara says there's a problem, though. Pachas nevela, is it teaching me that the nizak, the one whose animal is killed, is actually responsible for the difference of the price between the time that it dies and the time you can actually sell it after the case is closed? Tanina, we already have a mission that teaches us that. Tashlume nezek melamed shehabaylim etaflim benevela. That we learn that tashlume nezek is that the bailim, me who owned the shore that died, I have to bother with the nevela. So Gemara's answer is no. Chada betam v'chada b'muad. No. One is teaching me that in a tam animal, I need to go ahead and sell it, and one is teaching me that if it's a muad animal, that if yours was a muad animal, then I still have to go ahead and sell it. What's an afkamina? What would you have thought that if you would have told me one and not the other, why would you think that there would be a difference, that I would have to deal with my carcass, regardless of whether your animal was tam or muad? Why should that make a difference? So the Gemara says with Tzvi, it needs to teach me both. Di'ashmin and tam, if you told me that when your animal is a tam, so then I have to go ahead and I have to deal with it anyway, and I have to go ahead and get the loss between the time that I'm able to sell it and the time that it dies. Mishum dakati lo yaid. You might think Mishum dakati lo yaid ava muay di yaid emalo. So the opposite. I would have thought that by a muad, I don't have to go ahead and deal with the loss, and it's your responsibility because you should have watched your animal, and therefore only by a tam am I responsible to go ahead and get that loss to myself. But by a muad, you need to pick up the whole bill, including the difference that it goes down, and therefore it needs to teach me that even by a muad, I'm responsible. Again, the Gemara is not discussing. It doesn't seem to be fair. If your animal's a muad, and you should have been watching him, and therefore you need to pay me the full value, the whole difference between the 500 and the 100, you have to pay me the 400. Why is it fair that I'm then going to lose between the 100 and the 50? The Gemara is not discussing that. But the Gemara is discussing that if that there was a svara to say that by a tam I should have to go ahead and get that loss because of it's not really your fault, and anything that I'm getting I should be grateful for. But by a muad, really you should have to deal with that part, even the difference between the time of death and the time that I could sell it. Kamash malan, even by a muad. And if it was by a muad and telling me that by a muad I have to deal with it, why would you think that a muad would be more lenient? Mishum de kamashalim kule. We might think once you're paying me the full amount, the 400, now it's my problem to deal with the extra 100. But by a tam where you're only paying me half anyway, so maybe you should have to deal with the thing of al tam emalot tzricha. Therefore, you need both. So you have a svara to say both. We have a svara to say that really I should have to deal with it only by a tam, but by a muad you should have to deal with it. because Lamaisa it's a muad, so it's your problem. You should have to deal with that loss too, and not me. Or I could say no, by a muad I should have to deal with it because I'm getting so much more money from you. But by a tam where I'm not getting so much money from you, you should have to deal with it. Kamash malan, regardless, you have to deal with it bein b'muad bein b'tam, as much as it doesn't sound fair. And therefore, Lamaisa, if my animal is worth $500, so if your tam animal kills me, if your tam animal kills my shore, then you need to pay me the difference between 500 and 100. Now that it's dead, you need to pay me 200, and I still need to be metapel with the thing. And even if yours is a muad, so if yours is a muad, then you need to pay me the difference between the 500 and the 100, which is 400. But in either case, I need to deal with the difference of the value that it goes down after it dies until I'm able to sell it. Tashma. So now the Gemara wants to bring a proof again, trying to prove whether this half payment by a tam animal, when you have a tam animal that kills my animal, the half payment that you pay me, we're trying to prove whether that's a knas, whether that's a penalty, and therefore you would not be mishalim al piatzmo, or whether it's a tashlum, and therefore you would be mishalim al piatzmo. Tashma. Ma bein tam lemuad. What's the difference between a tam and a muad? Shatam mishalim chetzi nezek migufo, umuad mishalim nezek shalim min haliyah. So the difference is that by a tam, when you kill my animal, so let's say my animal was worth $500, and now it's only worth 100. So how much do we say you need to pay? You need to pay 200. But let's say your animal that killed my animal was only worth $100. So I have a $500 animal. Your little $100 animal killed my $500 animal. So again, how much do you officially have to pay me? The difference between 500 and 100, because I have to sell the carcass. So you need to pay me $400. The problem is your animal was only worth $100. So if seemingly you're going to sell your animal, get $100 for it. It'll get killed, whatever we'll do. But we have to actually. We don't kill it. We sell it. So we sell it. So you're going to get $100 for your animal. Now you only have $100. The question is, do you need to go into your bank account and get the extra $100 that you owe me for killing my shore? So the Gemara says, "Buy a tam mishalim chatzi nezek migufo." The amount that you need to pay, even though you really owe $200 here, if your thing is only worth $100, you only pay the value that your thing was. And if your thing only covers $100 of the $200 payment, that's all you pay by a tam. But by a muad, even by a muad, if yours was 100 and mine was worth 500, and now you owe me $400 from 500 to 100, you owe me 400. Even if your shore is only worth 100, you got to go to your bank account and take out the extra $300 when it's a muad. That's the difference between a tam and a muad. So the Gemara says, "V'lo kitani she'tamei mishalim al piatzmo, muad mishalim al piatzmo." What's the Gemara proving from here? You're giving me differences between tams and muads. So you told me one difference between a tam and a muad is that by a tam you need to go ahead and take out you don't have to take out from your bank account, but by a muad you have to take out of your bank account. Now let's think for a second. If the tam payment was actually a knas and not a tashlumin, so what should the Gemara have said? What else is the difference between tam and muad? That by a tam you pay knas, and therefore it's eino mishalim al piatzmo, and by a muad you pay tashlumin, and therefore it is mishalim al piatzmo. So the Gemara wants to prove that since it doesn't bring this as a difference, therefore it must be that the tashlumin, that the payment of the chatzi nezik is actually a tashlumin. So you might be asking me, what do you mean? Even if it's a case where it's a tashlumin, Lamaisa, it should have said, what's the difference? The difference is that by a tam you pay half, and by a muad you pay the whole. So Tosfos asked that question, and he says no, because look at the beginning of that statement. Mishalem chatzi nezek migufo. So if you read into it, it's really teaching you two things. The tam is what? Mishalem chatzi nezek. You pay half, and it's only migufo. And the muad mishalem nezek shalem, the full amount, and min aliyah. So again, if you wanted taina that the case of the tam is a knas payment, and the case of the muad, which everybody agrees to, is a regular tashlumin payment, then you should have also told me that the difference between a tam and a muad is that a tam cannot be modal piatzmo because it's a knas payment, and the muad can be modal piatzmo because it's a regular tashlumin payment. The fact that the Brisa doesn't tell me that and only gives me these other differences shows me that what? Shows me that clearly the half payment when my shore is a first-time offender is not a knas payment. It's actually a regular tashlumin payment, and therefore we have a proof that it's not a knas payment. Gemara says Tana v'sher. No, it left it out. It doesn't. It's not listing all the differences between tam and muad. So the Gemara says my shear dehai shear. You got to tell me at least one other thing that it left out. If you want to throw up your hands and say it left everything out, okay, it left this out. You're right. Maybe it left it out. But what else did it leave out? Tell me at least one other thing that it left out, so that you'll at least have a good argument that it's leaving some things out. If you can't tell me one other thing that it left out, then it makes no sense that it would only leave this thing out. So the Gemara says, Shayir chatzi kofer. Rashi explains it doesn't mean chatzi kofer. It explains kofer. It leaves out kofer. What's the difference? What do you mean kofer? We said in the other case, where your shore actually kills a person, So we said that if it's a first-time offender, then you kill the shore, but there's no kofar, you don't have to pay any ransom on your life. If it's a muad, then not only do we kill the shore, you need to pay a ransom on your life. So it left out of this brisa not only this din of knas by tam versus muad, it also left out the fact that by tam you don't pay a kofar on your life when your animal kills another person, and by muad you do pay a kofar on your life. So it's not just leaving out this idea that by a tam killing another shore it's a knas, and over here it's going to be a tashlum, and it leaves out a few other things, and therefore you can't prove anything from this brisa. Gemara says, "Imishum chatzi kofer lav shiurahu." If it's because of chatzi kofer, it's not a shira. Why? Because money. You can argue that this mission is actually Rabbi Yossi Aglili he di Amar tam mishalim chatzi kofer. You can argue that this mission is in fact Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What does Rabbi Yossi Aglili say? Rabbi Yossi Aglili actually argues with what the seemingly pashup shot in the pasuk is. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that if your animal is a first-time offender and kills another person, he still needs to pay. You still need to pay a kofer on your nefesh. And therefore, that would not be a difference between tam and muad. Again, one is paying a half, and one of them is paying a full kofer. It doesn't matter. The Gemara said over here, again, as we said, mishalim chatzi nezek can include a chatzi kofer, and mishalim nezek shalim can include a full kofer. And therefore, if it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, then really it's not a difference between tam and muad, because by tam and by muad you pay a kofer. Okay, very nice. By tam you pay a chatzi kofer, and by muad you pay a full kofer. But Lamaisa, that's already implied in the words mishalim chatzi nezek, mishalim nezek shalim. And therefore, according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, the only thing that you're leaving out here is what? Is that by a tam you can't pay al piatzmo because it's a knas, and by a muad you can't pay al piatzmo because it's not a knas. And therefore, if you hold like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, then it is a proof. So again, anytime, and I always say this, anytime you have a tashma, as long as you can learn it another way, you have no proof. We can't prove it either way, exactly what it was saying. But Lamai says, since we can learn it both ways, you have no proof. Originally, we wanted to learn, again, just a chazar, we wanted to learn from here the fact that it leaves out this one being modal piatzmo by tam, that you can't be modal piatzmo by tam, and that you can be modal piatzmo by a muad. It leaves that out. It must be that it's not a difference, and therefore both of them are tashlumins. Saying no, maybe it leaves out other things. We see that it doesn't leave anything else out. Yeah, but Rabbi Yossi Aglili, but maybe it's not Rabbi Yossi Aglili. And really, it left out the case of kofer as well. If it left out the case of kofer, then it can leave out this case of knas as well. So we have no proof from this mishnah. So we're still stuck. We still don't have a proof whether modeh b'knas, whether the half that you're paying when your shore is a first-time offender and kills another shore, we don't know whether that's a knas or whether that's actually a regular payment. Tashma. Hey mishori as ploni or shorish shel ploni arayz mishalim apiatzmo. So you should have grabbed this right away and you should have seen, what do you mean? It's mefurish in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that if your shore, we're not dealing with ploni right now, your shore kills shorish shel ploni, what do you pay? Apiatzmo. What does that imply? If you're paying apiatzmo, that your shore killed another shore, so al piatzmo, that implies that what? That the payment that you're paying is not a knas. That implies that it's a regular payment. Again, if it's a regular payment, then you really should have paid the whole thing. But God was nice to you and only made you pay half. But if you can actually pay it al piatzmo, then it's obviously a regular payment and not a knas. Because if it was knas, you wouldn't be able to pay it al piatzmo. So what's the Gemara going to answer? My lav betam. It's not talking about a tam, and if it's a tam, so then you have a proof. The Gemara says lo b'muad. No, it's talking about a muad. Eina chanami. Aval betam mai. Eino mishalim al piatzmo. Again, we want to prove from our Mishnah. We're talking about a case of a tam only. Because again, the half payment is only by a tam. So we wanted to say, is the payment by a tam, when your animal is a tam and kills my animal, is that payment of half the amount, is that a nezek, is that considered to be a knas or a tashlumin? So we want to prove from our Mishnah, which says, Raizel mishalim al piatzma, that you pay al piatzma, that it's there for what? It's there for a tashlumin and not a knas. We said, no, that's only a proof if our Mishnah is talking about a tam. But maybe our Mishnah is talking about a muad. If our Mishnah is talking about a muad, so then everybody agrees that it's tashlum and that you would pay al piatzmo, because there is no knas by a muad. It's the full amount. Aval betam mai, eina mishalim al piatzmo. Aditani seifa, avdo shel ploni, eina mishalim al piatzmo. Niflog v'nisna b'dida b'med dvar muad b'muad aval tam, eina mishalim al piatzmo. But we see over here in the seifa that Avdo shel ploni, that my shore killed the Avdo shel ploni, I don't pay al piatzmo. That's considered to be a knas according to everybody. The amount you pay for an eved is a knas. So it should have said, Bamed dvar mamuim b'muad aval b'tam eino mishalim al piatzmo. It should have made the difference in the beginning of the Mishnah. So really says the Gemara, Kula b'muad kamayrei. So the Gemara says, Eina chanami. You could theoretically try to bring a proof and say that our Mishnah is talking about a tam, and therefore Raizel mishalim al piatzmo by a tam clearly shows that the tam is not a knas and it's a tashlumin. But he's saying you can just as easily learn our Mishnah saying that it's talking about a muad. And when it says that you pay al piatzmo, that's talking about when your shore is a muad and you're paying the full amount. So then al piatzmo. But if it was a tam in a chanami, you wouldn't pay al piatzmo. So again, we have no proof from our Mishnah either. Tashma. Let's try again. Zaklal. Kol ha-mishalim yesar amasha hizik einu mishalim al piatzma. Let's go to the last part of the Mishnah. Here's the rule. Anybody who pays more than they were mazik does not pay al piatzma. What does that imply? Ha-pachos mimasha hizik mishalim al piatzma. If you pay more than you were mazik, you don't pay al piatzma because it's a knas. If you pay less than you were mazik, then you do pay al piatzma because it's not a knas. What are we trying to prove here? When you have this case of a tam, how much are you paying? You're paying half. That's less than your mazik. So that implies that less than your mazik, you're paying al piatzma. What does that imply? That the less than your mazik, the half that you're paying is a tashlumin and not a knas. So the Gemara says no. Lo tema hapachos mimasha hizik. Don't say less than your mazik. So then it's mishalim al piatzma. La ema hakama shehizik mishalim al piatzmo. Aval pachos mai eno mishalim al piatzmo. Gemara says no. The inference is this is the rule. Kol mishalim yesa mashahizik eno mishalim al piatzmo. Anything that's more than you damaged, you don't pay on yourself. What does that imply? That implies that if it's exactly what you damaged, then what? You pay al piatzmo. And if it's less than you damaged, you don't pay al piatzmo. Gemara says that's ridiculous. Listen to Ze'aklal. What should it have said? It should have said, this is the rule. Kol she'eno mishalim kama shehizik. If you're not paying exactly what you were mazik, whether it was more or less, eno mishalim al piatzmo. Dimashma pachos umashma yeser. It should have just said, anybody who's not paying exactly what they were mazik, which would imply more or less, does not pay al piatzmo. So the Gemara says tiyufta, you're right, it's a tiyufta. And therefore, if it's a tiyufta, what does it seem to imply? Tiyufta seems to imply that if you're paying less than what you were mazik, so then ena chanami, you are mishalim al piatzma, because again, our Mishnah only says that if it's more than your mazik, then you don't pay al piatzma. That implies that if it's less than your mazik, you would pay al piatzma. What does that imply? Palganiska is mamona. It's a tashlumin. Gemara says v'hilchsa palganiska knasa. The law is a palganiska is a knas, and therefore eno mishalim al piatzma. So what's the Gemara's obvious question? Tiyufta v'hilchsa. You just brought a tiyufta, proving to me from our Mishnah that palganiska is mamona. And now you're coming and saying, now we have, the halacha is that palganiska is knasa. Yes, that's the pshat. Time of my tosaf, because what's the reason that you brought it tiyufta? It's not a real tiyufta. Why? Mishum delo kitani kama shehizik. Because you wanted it to say kama shehizik. And the fact that it didn't say kama shehizik, therefore we saw that anything that's either equal to or less than, you are going to be paying al piatzmo. Lo psikale, couldn't say that. Kevan de ikka chatzi nedek soros de hilchsak mirla de mamonahu mishum hachi lo kitani. He's saying it couldn't imply that anything less is going to actually be a knas, because we know that there's actually a case where something is less than the amount and it's not actually a knas. And Rashi explains that if you have a case where you have your animal is walking and kicks up rocks and damages somebody, so Rashi explains, based on the Gemara over there in Baba Kama, I believe, that in that case it's considered to be a mammon payment. It's halacha l'moshe mesina that it's considered to be a mammon payment, and even though it's you have to pay half of what you damaged. When your thing kicks up rocks, you have to pay half of what you damaged. L'maisa, that's a mammon payment, not a knas payment. So it couldn't say a general rule that anything less than the full amount is going to be mishalim al piatzmo, because there's a case where you're paying less than the full amount, where you can't be mishalim al piatzmo. The case of nezek tzraros. If you go ahead and come to Beis Din and say, my animal kicked up tzraros, so that's a mammon case, and over there you can be mazik, you can do it al piatzmo, because that's a case where we say that it's mammon. But in general, we can't necessarily prove anything from that Mishnah. So again, we can't prove anything from any of the Mishnahs. It comes out that the Gemara the Gemara at the end is saying that what? The halacha is that chatzi mammon is knas, and therefore again, when your shore is a first-time offender and it goes ahead and kills another shore, so you need to pay half of the amount that shore was worth before. Again, if it was worth 500 and now it's worth 100 when it's dead, so now the owner needs to deal with that $100, but you need to pay half of the 500 to 100. You need to pay half of the 400. You need to pay the 200. You only pay the amount that your shore was worth. So if your shore was only worth 100, then you don't pay the full 200. You only pay the 100. But regardless, the 200 that you're paying, that's considered to be a knas. And therefore, if you come to Beis Din and say, my shore went ahead and killed his shore, so then if it's a tam and you're claiming that it's a first-time offender, you would not pay anything, because that $200 that you're paying is a knasa. really, let's just go back for a second. Really, according to the halacha, you shouldn't have had to pay anything. Because the way that we seemingly are saying is that stam shvarim are becheska shimor, that a regular animal left at home, it's okay to leave them at home to babysit for themselves because they're considered to be shimor as long as they're not a muad. Really, you shouldn't have to pay anything. But God gave you a little slap on the hand to be a little bit more careful, and therefore gave you a knas that you need to pay half. But lamaisa, therefore, if you're the one that's initiating the entire thing, since it's only a knas, in that case you would not have to pay the knas because modeh beknas is pater. We give everything on a silver platter. Fine. That's the Hilchasa. So the Gemara is going to say now, V'hashta de Amar Palga Niska Knasa. Now that you've established that Palga Niska is Knasa, so let's be honest. In 2015, most of us don't have shore. We don't have a shore. But, okay, maybe you have a shore. Would you like to speak for the camera, please, and tell us about your shore? So Palga Niska Knasa. So if you're telling me that the Palga Niska is a Knasa, the question is, how do we bring this to modern day payments? Okay, we're not going to get into the whole discussion, but how do we get into this? Let's say your dog goes ahead and kills somebody now. So let's assume that Palga Niska Knas, so that is a Knas. So if you come and claim that my dog bit off this guy's head, so maybe you have to pay half the value of the animal. But again, it's only if you're the one that's initiating, then you don't pay because it's a Knas. So let's see a case here. If you're telling me that the half amount that you pay is actually a Knas, Haikalba de Ochal Imre. If you have a dog that eats a sheep, how does it eat a sheep? So Rashi explains it goes ahead, it strangles it, and then it eats it up. V'shunra da'achil tarnagole ravreve. Or you have a cat that is able to strangle a chicken, a large chicken, and eat it. Mishunehu, so that's considered to be a case of mishuna. That's not a normal way. A normal dog cannot eat a sheep. So that's considered mishuna, and therefore what? Rashi says, look at the Rashi, the last Rashi on the skinny lines. Already it looks like the equivalent of the last line in the Gemara. Mishunehu. Ein darko bekach. It's not normal for an animal, for a dog to be able to eat a sheep. V'chol nizik mishuna bebehema have a tolda de keren tama. And the rule is that any nezek that is mishuna, that's not normal, it's considered to be a tolda de keren, of a tam. She'af hi mishuna. She'ein darke bekach. Because it's not mishuna. Anytime a tam animal does anything, it's not normal. And therefore the chatzi nezek hu de mishalim. So again, it's equating your dog, which does something that it shouldn't have necessarily done, that you shouldn't have necessarily thought a dog's going to eat a sheep. It's equating that to the case where your shore, which is a tam, kills another shore. So just like we said that the shore, which is a tam, kills another shore, what is that? The payment that you need to pay is what? Is a knas. So too, when your dog does something mishuna, does something that it shouldn't have done, that you shouldn't have had to even thought that it would ever do, so therefore you need to pay a knas. And therefore, if it's modeh beknas, if you're the one that comes and says that my kelev went ahead and ate that sheep, you would not have to pay it because it's a knas. But further, that's not what we're bringing it for here. Over here, we're bringing it that what? We're bringing it to tell us v'lo magbinan bebavel, that if you come ahead and forget about it, if you say it, if you're brought to court in Bavel, outside of Eretz Yisrael, and the guy who owns the sheep says, this guy's dog killed my sheep, again, since that half payment is what? It's not a mishalim, it's only a knas. Since it's only knas, it can't be brought in Bavel. Why not? Says Rashi. V'kevan de knasahu lo magbino le bedaine Bavel, she'ein sham smicha bezekenim. Because they don't have real smicha. V'lo mikru mumchim, they're not called mumchim. V'gabe knas k'tiv asher yashiyun elokim. Just like we said on the top, we're going full circle. Just like we said in the beginning of the shir, asher yashiyun elokim means that only God can make you a rasha, and therefore modeh beknas is pater. We learned something else from that pasuk. That not only is modeh beknas pater, when you're dealing with a knas, you have to have real bezdin, you have to have real mumchim, real judges who know what they're talking about in order to levy a knas. So in Bavel, they don't have these mumchim that we need. So if this case of your dog eating a sheep is the equivalent of a shore, which is a tam, killing another shore, then just like that is a case of knas, and therefore modeh beknas is going to be pater, so too in the case of the dog, modeh that my dog killed your sheep is going to be pater. But not only that, just like by a case of knas, you need to have mumchim. So if we're living in Bavel and my dog kills your sheep and you want to bring me to court, you need to bring me to court in Eretz Yisrael. You can't bring me to court in Bavel, because since this is a knas payment based on the fact that it's similar to a tam shore killing another shore, since it's a knas payment, therefore the dayanim here in Bavel cannot judge this case. So says the Gemara, but if it's a small sheep or a small chicken, then it's normal, and then you can bring him to regular court because that's not a knas. That's just regular payment. You owe me for my sheep. You should have watched your dog, and he killed my sheep. Your sheep's a big sheep, and there was no way for me to know. You're right. We need to go to Eretz Yisrael. However, even though we have to go to Eretz Yisrael, if I, the owner of the sheep, grab money from you, the owner of the dog, I grab half the value of my sheep, which is what you owe me. Since it's a knas, even though we should have gone to Eretz Yisrael, if I grab it from you, since I'm really entitled to it, we're not going to take it away from me. Amar, and if I, the owner of the sheep, don't want to go ahead and grab it from you, but I want to take you to Beis Din in Eretz Yisrael, so if I say to the Beis Din here in Bavel, Akvu li zimna Eretz Yisrael, make me a court date in Eretz Yisrael, Magvina lay, then they make a court date, Vilo azil mashtamina lay, and if you, the owner of the dog, refuses to come to Eretz Yisrael to do the court case, so then we're going to put you into Cherem. Fine. Beinkach u beinkach meshtamina lay. It doesn't mean here cherem. It's actually using the word meshtamina in two different ways. In the case of the dog and the sheep, so if I, the owner of the sheep, insist that you, the owner of the dog, come to Eretz Yisrael, then if you don't come, we put you into cherem. But either way, whether I take you to Beis Din in Eretz Yisrael, or whether seemingly, even if it's a time, even if it's the first time, beinkach u beinkach meshtamina lay damrina lay sale kazikcha. Either way, if your dog goes out and kills my sheep, whether it's the first time, whether I'm taking you to court, whether I'm not taking you to court, we put the dog down. Now we know where they get it from. We put the dog down. As soon as the dog kills another sheep, as soon as the cat kills the chicken, seemingly the Gemara seems to be implying whether a big chicken or small chicken, seems to be implying that we put it down. Beinkach or beinkach, even though one can argue that you would only put it down if it was a case where it did something that it shouldn't have done. Beinkach or beinkach mishtamino le damrino le sale kazecha midi Rabbi Nassan, because we learn from Rabbi Nassan, Ditanya Rabbi Nassan Omer, minayin shelo yigdal adam kelev rabatoch beisa. Where do you know in pasuk that you shouldn't raise a dangerous dog? V'lo yamit sulam ra'ua betoch beisa. You shouldn't keep a ladder that is broken in your house. Shenemar v'lo tasim damim b'veisecha. You can't have damim in your house, and therefore, if your dog goes out and kills, for sure, if it goes out and kills a sheep, and for sure, if your cat goes out and does something mishun and kills a large tarnagol, for sure, in those cases, we put the dog down. And again, based on the Gemara, how you want to learn the Gemara, maybe we would even be talking about a case where it's a zutra case, where it's orchehu, that you would go ahead and you would put down the animal as well, and that's based on the pasuk v'lo tasim damim beveisecha. Hadron alach elu naros, and hadron alach the first part of Art Scroll KESUVOS. Shraga.